Hello, St. Mark's. On Wednesday nights, instead of being able to get together to rehearse in person, the choir has been meeting on Zoom. And we look at the hymns for the following week and discuss the texts and some of the history behind the hymns. And they pointed out to me last week that several of the hymns we've been doing have been from Wales. They're Welsh hymns. Just in case some of you don't know, Wales is officially a part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It was an independent nation from 613 until 1282 when it came under English rule. Welsh people are descendants of pre-Celtic, Celtic, and other ethnicities. And actually, my last name has Welsh origins. The name Bayless comes from what is now the Cardiff area in the south of Wales. Sort of ironically, and as an aside, during the early days of the pandemic, I received a Zoom invitation to a birthday party. It was going to be a pub trivia birthday party for someone's 40th birthday, and it was sent to Daniel Bayless. But the Daniel Bayless they meant actually lives in Cardiff, Wales to this day. Wales has a rich history of hymn singing. It goes way back. Hymns are found in the earliest Welsh manuscripts, and there's a 6th century monk named Gildas who described the voices of the young sweetly singing the praises of God in Wales. Medieval church life and church music was centered around a monastery founded by Saint David. It's in St. David's, Wales, which is in Pembrokeshire. In addition to singing the daily office and the Mass, many monasteries in Wales, particularly the Cistercian monasteries, would hire musicians that were not necessarily part of the monastic community. But these musicians were known as bards. They're sort of minstrels who acted as historians, and they would entertain the abbot and his table at meals, and they would also sing songs about the lives of the saints. Sadly, in the mid-16th century, the monasteries in England and Wales and the British Isles were dissolved by the crown. Because of this, we don't even have a single fragment of music before this time period in the libraries of the cathedrals. However, in the 17th century, the first hymn collection in Welsh was published. It was published by a man named Edmund Price in 1621. I cannot pronounce Welsh, so I'll put the title down below so you can read it. One hymn in our current hymnal, the hymnal 1982, comes from this. It's hymn number 697, and the tune name in modern English is called Song 67. This is what it sounds like. Now, after this, there was a time period where there weren't many Welsh hymns composed. There were a few things written for Presbyterian congregations to sing after the Lord's Supper. However, it's not really until the 18th century, when religious fervor comes back to Wales, that we start having hymn collections published again. In 1735, Howell Harris and Daniel Rowland began an evangelical movement in Wales. It was called the Calvinistic Methodist Revival Movement. Like the Wesleys who came after them, Harris and Rowland consolidated their movement into societies, smaller groups, sort of like a parish. And these societies were governed by rules. These sets of rules said how they were supposed to worship and how they were supposed to conduct their daily lives as part of the society. And along with these rules was published a small collection of hymns. However, it wasn't until slightly later in the 18th century that hymnody truly becomes important again in Wales. There was a man named Cwm Williams who really brought Welsh hymnody to the forefront. He published his first collection of hymns in 1744. It's called Alleluia. That's one Welsh word I can pronounce. And then he compiled another collection of hymns. This collection in English is called The Songs for Those Upon the Sea of Glass. The Welsh is down below. This was published in 1762. And this collection made possible the flowering of the Methodist revival in Wales. In the late 18th century, folk tunes began to influence hymn writing in Wales. At this time, Welsh folk tunes were often written in what we think of as a minor key today, or if you know a little bit more about music theory, the Dorian mode, with flattened thirds and sevenths. The Dorian mode sounds something like this. They may have been written that way, but sometimes they were performed in a major key, which sounds like this. And sometimes they would go back and forth. Nobody knows exactly what the rhyme or reason was for going between that minor or Dorian feel and the major feel. So one example of this modal shift are the hymn tunes Llangolfen and Llanfilyn. Llangolfen is the G minor version, Llanfilyn is the G major version. Our hymnal 1982 includes Llangolfen at hymn number 68, and it sounds like this. But in the hymnal 1940, it includes Llanfilyn, which sounds like this. It's the same tune, just a different mode. I mentioned that in the late 18th century, hymn tunes were beginning to be influenced by folk tunes. However, in Wales, because of their Calvinistic roots, they maintained a strict divide between sacred tunes and secular tunes. So you would almost never hear a Welsh folk tune used as a hymn. This is in contrast to England or Germany, where this was pretty commonplace. However, I thought I'd play some examples of some folk melodies that you may know from Wales at this time. One is Ard Hidi Nos. I think that's how you pronounce it. Here's the text, and here's what it sounds like. There's another tune called The Ash Grove that goes like this. And one that I'm sure you all know is Deck the Halls, of course. In the 18th century, however, music in Wales fell into a very sad state. There were even music teachers who couldn't read music notation. As a result, there were very few hymns that were published during this time. In the middle of the 19th century, however, interest in music and singing had a resurgence in Wales. It reawakened. John Roberts was a composer, lecturer, conductor, publisher, and editor of hymn tunes and hymn collections. His finest collection of hymn tunes was published in 1859. In English, it's called Hymns and Tunes, and the Welsh is below. This was a hymnal created for Welsh Methodists, both Calvinists and Wesleyans. As a result of Robert's work, hymn singing became extremely popular in Wales. It became customary to sing hymns over and over and over at the end of services. Roberts and his companions hosted a series of what we call in English singing meetings. The Welsh is down below. And these events eventually blossomed to include not only hymn tunes, but also choruses from oratorios, like the choruses of Mendelssohn or the choruses of Handel. As a result, because of this broadening of music, music in Welsh chapels became the center of musical life in Wales. And music was so important that preachers would even sing parts of their sermons. It's a tradition called it's spelled H-W-Y-L, and I have no idea how to pronounce it. I tried finding it on Google Translate, but Google Translate doesn't even speak Welsh. So H-W-Y-L. And it's a tradition that came out of the 19th century, and there were recordings well into the 20th century of preachers who used this style of preaching. Some other notable Welsh hymn tunes include the hymn Aberystwyth. Fans of The Crown may remember the episode where there's a terrible mining accident in a small town in Wales. And Queen Elizabeth doesn't go to the funeral, but she sends Prince Philip in her stead. And when he comes back, the Queen asks Prince Philip what it was like. And Prince Philip says that he's never heard singing like what he heard at this funeral. And here's the hymn that they sang. It's Aberystwyth. Another very famous Welsh hymn that we actually sang yesterday is called Cwm Rhonnda. Now, this one is not only a favorite of American congregations, but it is also sung in Wales, not only in church, but at every rugby and soccer match. Since Welsh people know this hymn tune so well, it was sung at the wedding of Prince William and Catherine Middleton, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, when they were married at Westminster Abbey, because it is so popular and everyone throughout the British Isles knows this tune. Another famous Welsh tune is Hyfrydol, and we just sang this a couple of weeks ago. Here's what it sounds like. Now we sing Hyfrydol to the text, Love divine, all loves excelling. Love divine, all loves excelling. But actually in Wales, they use a different tune. And so our choir has sung that Love divine, all loves excelling text to the traditional Welsh tune, Blaenwern, which sounds like this. Another hymn tune that I know that St. Mark sings with great fervor whenever we are able to sing it together is Immortal Invisible. The tune is called Saint Denio. And if all goes according to plan, we'll sing that one in the next few weeks. There's one last Welsh hymn tune I would like to share with you, and it's the beautiful tune called Rhosymedre. The English composer, Ralph Vaughan Williams, wrote a beautiful organ setting of this hymn. So here's the hymn tune. So I hope you enjoy this Vaughan Williams setting of Rhosymedre, and we'll see you soon.
Uh-oh, you're evaluating my work.
I am.
Are you subscribed?
I will with the red button.
And give us a thumbs up.
I'm a fan, of course.